The prison yard was unusually quiet that afternoon. Most of the inmates were either eating, pacing, or tossing a basketball back and forth. But one man stood out calm, composed, almost untouchable. Steven Seagal, dressed in his standard prison garb, was simply walking along the concrete path, his eyes scanning the yard like a hawk, yet completely relaxed. There was a quiet confidence about him that drew attention without demanding it. That's when they noticed him. A group of notorious bullies, known for intimidating anyone they deemed weak, spotted Steven from across the yard. They didn't recognize him immediately, just assumed he was another quiet inmate, the type that was easy to humiliate. One of them nudged his friend. "Look at that guy," he sneered. "Bet we could have some fun with him." They approached, smirks plastered across their faces, projecting a confidence that only comes from years of getting away with intimidation. "Hey," one of them called out, loud enough for the nearby inmates to hear. "What's with the look? You think you're better than the rest of us?" Steven didn't answer. He kept walking, hands relaxed by his sides, his eyes forward. But every subtle movement spoke volumes. He was aware, alert, and perfectly in control. The bullies thought his silence meant fear. They exchanged grins. "This is going to be easy," one muttered. One of them stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "We don't talk to us like that," he said, trying to sound menacing. A small crowd of curious inmates began to gather, sensing an imminent confrontation. The tension in the air was electric. You could almost hear the mental calculation happening in everyone's heads. Who would act first? Who would back down? And then came the moment that froze everyone, a subtle shift in Steven's stance, a calm intensity in his gaze that made even the most confident bully hesitate for the first time. The air seemed to thicken. Something told everyone present that this encounter would not go the way they expected. They thought he was just another inmate, but what happened next left everyone frozen. The audience is left on edge, wondering what Steven will do, and the bully's overconfidence starts to crack ever so slightly. Every second is building suspense. Every glance is loaded with tension. And that's when the game really begins. The bullies circled Steven like predators, closing in on unsuspecting prey. At first, it seemed almost like a game to them. They mocked his posture, whispered insults, and tried to provoke a reaction. "Hey, what's with the long hair? You some kind of tough guy?" One sneered. Another laughed and nudged him. "I bet he can't even throw a punch." But Steven didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. Every movement was calm, deliberate, controlled. The bullies mistook this for fear. They had done this 100 times before, and every time, it worked. But something about Steven's calm intensity unsettled them. They couldn't put their finger on it, but it was different. "Say something, man. You're too quiet," one demanded, stepping closer. The crowd of inmates around them grew larger. Phones were pulled out, cameras quietly recording. People sensed that something big was about to happen, and they didn't want to miss it. The tension in the air was electric. Every eye in the yard was on Steven and the group of bullies, waiting for the first sign of action. "Now listen," Steven said, his voice low, measured, but carrying authority. "I'm not here to fight. I'm just walking. I don't want trouble, but I won't let anyone humiliate me or my family if I choose to stand my ground." The bullies froze for a brief moment, surprised by the calm firmness in his tone. They weren't used to people talking back, so politely yet assertively. One of them chuckled nervously, trying to mask the unease creeping in. "We'll see about that," he muttered, but the confidence in his voice sounded forced. The surrounding inmates started whispering among themselves. "Who is this guy? He doesn't seem scared at all. I've never seen someone stare down those guys like that." The tension became contagious. Everyone was holding their breath. Then came the engagement moment, the subtle mental trap for the viewers. The camera panned across the crowd, and Steven's eyes swept the area calmly, missing nothing. "Before we see what happens next," a narrator would say, "tell me where you're watching this from. City? Country? Type it in the comments because this story is about to blow your mind." The bullies tried again, moving closer, throwing small shoves, testing his patience. Each push, each taunt was meant to provoke, but Steven's body language remained controlled, relaxed, yet every muscle was ready. The more they pushed, the more they underestimated him. They didn't realize that their overconfidence was becoming their weakness. Murmurs spread among the onlookers. Phones were recording, whispers grew louder, and even some of the bullies began to doubt themselves. Maybe he's not just some quiet guy, one muttered under his breath. Others just stared, confused by the paradox, calm, silent, and unshakable, and then, a subtle shift in the air made everyone lean forward. You could feel it. Something was coming. Steven's eyes glimmered with quiet awareness, a hint of what was about to unfold. The bullies still thought they were in control, but the yard, the crowd, and even the viewers at home could sense the tide slowly turning. This was more than a physical standoff. It was mental, it was emotional, and it was about to teach everyone, the bullies, the inmates, and the audience, that calm confidence can be far more powerful than aggression. The stage was set. The bullies had no idea what was coming, and in that moment, the entire prison yard waited, holding its breath. The bullies had clearly misjudged Steven Seagal. What started as casual mocking had escalated into open intimidation, and they were beginning to realize that their usual tactics weren't working. One of them stepped closer, trying to force him off his path. "Hey man, step aside or you're gonna regret it," he growled, fists flexing. Another tried to crowd him from the side, cutting off any chance of escape, but Steven didn't flinch. Not a muscle twitched in panic, not a word of anger slipped from his lips. He simply tilted his head, eyes scanning the group, reading every movement, every shift in weight, every subtle intention. There was no fear in him, just calm, deliberate awareness. And that calm was starting to unnerve the bullies more than any punch could have. One of the braver bullies tried to shove him, expecting resistance, expecting a reaction. Steven let the shove slide harmlessly off his shoulder, his body barely moving. The motion was so smooth, so controlled, that it made the attacker stumble slightly. The bully's smirk faltered. "What the?" he muttered under his breath, regaining balance. The other bullies exchanged nervous glances. Something was off. They had come expecting to humiliate, to assert dominance, but instead, every move they made seemed to strengthen the calm authority radiating from Steven. They were mentally trapped without even realizing it, caught in a standoff where aggression was no longer the advantage. Around them, other inmates had started gathering, sensing the tension. Phones were discreetly raised to capture every second. Everyone watching could feel the emotional weight in the air, the mix of fear, awe, and anticipation. The bully's confidence was cracking, and the crowd could sense it. Even those who had never met Steven before seemed to instinctively know that this wasn't an ordinary confrontation. Then came the whispers of doubt among the bullies themselves. "Maybe he's not what we think he is," muttered one. Another laughed nervously, trying to mask his unease. But Steven's presence didn't just intimidate physically, it was a mental trap. He projected calm control in such a way that it made their aggression feel childish, reckless, and, ultimately, foolish. At this moment, the perfect engagement opportunity arrived, the kind that hooks viewers and keeps them mentally involved. Narration could guide the audience directly. If you were in his shoes, surrounded by aggressive bullies, what would you do? Type your reaction in the comments before you see what happens next. It forced viewers to put themselves in the scene, to emotionally invest in Steven's calm resilience, and to picture the humiliation that was about to unfold for the bullies. Back in the yard, Steven's family of observers, other inmates, not literal family, shifted slightly, sensing the tension. The bullies tried one last push, stepping into his space, trying to assert control physically and psychologically. But Steven didn't budge. Every motion he made, every small glance he threw, communicated restraint, awareness, and absolute confidence. His body language was saying, "I am calm, I am ready, and you are about to regret this." The emotional trap was now fully set. The bullies had committed themselves to aggression, but the psychological advantage had already shifted. Every observer could feel it. The mental upper hand was slipping away from the aggressors and settling firmly with Steven. The tension reached its peak. Every viewer watching at home felt it too. The anticipation, the suspense, the quiet dread of what was coming next. And then the first subtle shift happened. The bully who had been the most confident faltered, his stance unsure, his aggression teetering on the edge of panic. For a split second, the balance of power became clear. Calm, controlled presence can outmatch reckless force every time. The bullies thought they were in charge. They thought they were about to humiliate Steven Seagal, but for the first time, They realized maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated him. The stage was set for what would come next, the moment when mental control and physical precision would combine to humble them in a way they would never forget. And that moment was only seconds away. The yard had gone completely silent. Even the distant clatter of the prison gates seemed muted. The bullies, who had come in brimming with confidence, now found themselves frozen, trapped in a tense standoff with a man who moved with the quiet authority of someone who had seen and survived far more than they could imagine. Steven Seagal didn't need to shout or swing a fist. His calm presence, his measured breathing, the subtle precision in every slight shift of his body communicated something far more powerful than brute strength. Awareness, control, absolute command of the situation. The bullies could feel it, even if they didn't understand it. Then it happened. A shadow of recognition flickered across the eyes of one of the nearby inmates, a man who had been leaning against the fence, silently watching. He whispered to his friend, barely audible over the tension, "Wait, that's Steven Seagal, isn't it?" The words spread like wildfire. Whispered confirmations rippled through the yard. No way. It is him, the guy from the movies, the martial arts master, the legend. For the bullies, the recognition was like a cold splash of water. Confidence evaporated instantly, replaced by a creeping panic. They had come to intimidate a man they assumed was just another inmate, someone quiet, easy to humiliate. Instead, they realized they were standing in front of someone who had been celebrated worldwide for unmatched martial skill, for discipline, for mastery of both mind and body. And yet, Steven didn't raise his voice. He didn't reveal his identity or brag. He didn't even react to the whispers. His calmness was almost maddening in its simplicity. The crowd could see it. This was a man who didn't need fame to assert authority. He simply existed in a space that demanded respect. The bullies glanced at each other, uncertainty and fear flickering across their faces. They started whispering among themselves, trying to mask the growing panic. He can't be calm after everything we've thrown at him. One of them muttered, "Maybe we overdid it." But no one dared to step back. The crowd of inmates watching began murmuring, phones recording every moment. They weren't just spectators anymore, they were witnesses to the slow unraveling of the bullies' confidence. Every observer could feel the mental shift happening. The power dynamic had changed. The calm, deliberate presence of Steven Seagal had replaced fear with awe. At that point, even some of the prison guards nearby had paused, sensing the tension. They could see the bullies' hesitation, the subtle shifts in posture, the nervous glances exchanged. Something extraordinary was unfolding. The recognition was more than a name. It was an aura, an unspoken understanding of who this man was, what he was capable of, and why no one dared challenge him further. Meanwhile, Steven remained unshaken. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't make a show of his recognition. Every step, every glance, every breath was measured. The mental trap was fully set. The bullies were now humiliated by the mere presence of the man they had tried to mock. Their own aggression had led them into a corner they didn't know how to escape. For the viewers at home, the suspense was unbearable. The narrative had shifted. It was no longer about a confrontation, it was about recognition, respect, and the psychological unraveling of the bullies. The audience could almost feel the panic creeping in, see the fear in their eyes, and anticipate the coming moment when the humiliation would be complete. And just as the whispers spread across the yard, one of the bullies made a tiny, foolish move, perhaps a scoff, perhaps a step forward, testing Steven's calm again. That's when it became clear. The recognition alone hadn't saved him. The final lessons in mental dominance, precision, and control were about to begin. The bullies thought they were in charge. They thought they had the upper hand. But now, every person watching, every inmate, every viewer at home could feel it. The tide had turned. Steven Seagal was no longer just a man in the yard. He was the storm before it struck. Calm, silent, and unstoppable. The bullies had been frozen, their confidence cracked by recognition alone. But now they were desperate. Their bravado faltered, yet instinctively they tried one last show of dominance. "You think you're better than us?" One hissed, stepping forward aggressively. Fists clenched. "We don't back down." Steven Seagal didn't move at first. His eyes followed each motion, tracking every subtle shift of weight, every micro-expression, every hint of intent. The bullies expected fear, or at least hesitation. Instead, he exuded calm assurance, the kind that makes even the most arrogant opponent question every decision they've ever made. "Stop," Steven said softly, almost casually. But the authority in his voice carried a weight that silenced the yard, not because he raised it, not because he yelled. It was the calm, unshakable certainty that made the bullies pause mid-step. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The air thickened. Phones hovered mid-record, capturing every heartbeat of tension. The spectators leaned in, sensing the inevitable. Every person watching could feel the mental trap tightening. The bullies had no escape, and they didn't even fully realize it yet. One of the bullies, still desperate to reclaim control, lunged forward, thinking his aggression might break the calm. Steven shifted, almost imperceptibly, blocking the move with the precision of a seasoned martial artist. It wasn't violent, it was fluid, like water, redirecting energy. The bully stumbled, off balance, and froze, shocked at how effortless it had been for Steven to neutralize him. The other bullies hesitated. They exchanged nervous glances, realizing their attacks were not only failing but making them look foolish. The air of dominance they had carried in earlier moments was collapsing before their eyes. Their body language betrayed it. Hunched shoulders, twitching hands, tight jaws. They were trapped mentally, humiliated without a single punch thrown. Steven's calm didn't waver. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the group, voice still measured, but firm. "You tried to intimidate someone you didn't understand. You assumed weakness where there was none. That's the mistake you'll never make again." The words hit harder than any physical strike. For the first time, some of the bullies' bravado crumbled entirely. Their own aggression had been their undoing, and the subtle, controlled authority of Steven Seagal had turned the yard into a psychological battlefield they had no chance of winning. Spectators murmured in awe. "Did you see that?" whispered one. "He didn't even touch them, and they're done." Phones continued rolling, capturing every detail for the outside world. Every viewer could feel the shift. The bullies were humiliated, and Steven's quiet, deliberate dominance was absolute. And then, for a moment, the scene became almost cinematic. The bullies' attempts at defiance faltered completely, replaced by fear and disbelief. Their postures collapsed. Some stepped back instinctively, while others simply froze, unable to process the reversal of power. Steven, calm as ever, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered. Aggression is meaningless without understanding. Intimidation fails against control, and respect cannot be taken, it must be earned. At home, viewers could feel the tension peak, the slow burn of intimidation, the suspense of recognition, the careful escalation. All of it culminated in this moment of controlled mastery. Mentally, emotionally, the audience was trapped alongside the bullies, experiencing the same awe and fear that filled the prison yard. Steven stepped back, letting the bullies realize their defeat fully. Silence descended over the yard. The air, once thick with aggression, now carried only the hum of realization. The man they tried to humiliate had not only resisted, he had completely dismantled their intimidation, with calm, precision, and authority. The bullies thought they were in control. They thought they could humiliate him, but in that moment, everyone present, including the viewers, understood that true power lies in calm, mental dominance, and the courage to stand firm without striking unnecessarily. The stage was now perfectly set for the ultimate reveal, the moment when humiliation, recognition, and psychological mastery would fully converge. The tension in the yard had reached its breaking point. The bullies, once brimming with overconfidence, were now frozen in disbelief, their earlier bravado replaced by fear and confusion. Every movement they had made to intimidate Steven Seagal had backfired, and now the psychological dominance he wielded was undeniable. It was then that one of the nearby inmates, finally daring to speak aloud, whispered to the growing crowd, "Wait, don't you all know who he really is?" His voice trembled slightly as he said the words. "That's Steven Seagal, the martial arts legend, the actor, the guy everyone's seen on TV, the guy who's fought masters from all over the world." The words spread like wildfire. Whispers rippled through the yard, growing louder with each repetition. Steven Seagal? No way. The martial arts master? The man from the movies? The legend? The bullies' faces went pale, Their confidence evaporated instantly, replaced by sheer panic. They had believed they were confronting just another inmate, someone ordinary, someone easy to humiliate. But now they realized they were standing in front of a man whose very presence commanded respect, whose skills were legendary, and whose calm authority had already humiliated them without a single strike. The crowd's energy shifted dramatically. Inmates who had been watching from the edges stepped closer, phones raised to capture every moment. Even the prison guards paused, sensing the tension and awe in the air. The recognition wasn't just about fame, it was about mastery, control, and the unmistakable aura of a man who had faced and overcome challenges far beyond anything the bullies could imagine. But Steven Seagal didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat, didn't flex, didn't need to. His calm, measured demeanor said everything. Every subtle glance, every slight shift in posture, every motionless pause communicated authority, control, and unshakable confidence. The bullies were trapped mentally and emotionally. They had underestimated him, and now there was no way out. One of the bullies, trying desperately to reclaim some shred of dignity, took a step forward. Steven's eyes met his. That single gaze, calm yet penetrating, stopped him instantly. The bully froze, his mind racing, realizing that no aggressive move, no taunt, no shove, could undo what had already been revealed. His fear was no longer just of a physical confrontation, it was a deep, instinctual understanding that he had been completely outmatched, mentally and emotionally. At this moment, the narrator could insert a powerful engagement line to trap the viewers. Have you ever seen someone completely turn the tables like this? Type yes or no in the comments before we show what happens next. The crowd of inmates erupted in quiet admiration. Some whispered in awe, some laughed nervously. Every single person present could feel the weight of the moment. Steven Seagal, silent, controlled, and calm, had dismantled the bully's arrogance without throwing a single punch. The lesson was clear. True strength lies in mental dominance, in calm authority, and in the courage to face intimidation without losing composure. The bullies, now fully humbled, slumped back, avoiding eye contact. Their attempts at aggression had been neutralized, their humiliation complete. Steven's presence alone had flipped the power dynamic entirely. He didn't gloat, he didn't mock, he simply stepped back, allowing the bullies to absorb the lesson. Respect, not fear, had been the ultimate weapon. The prison yard, once filled with tension and potential violence, now resonated with awe and silence. For the viewers at home, the psychological trap was complete. Mentally, they were experiencing what the bullies felt. The shock, the awe, the realization that control, calm, and presence could outperform aggression every time. Emotionally, they were hooked, invested, and ready for the final closure, the aftermath, the moral, the lasting lesson of humility and respect. The bullies thought they could humiliate him. They thought they had the upper hand. But the reveal had shown everyone, the crowd, the inmates, the viewers, that underestimating a master, underestimating calm and authority, is a mistake you only make once. The stage was now set for the final act, the aftermath, the viral moment, the moral lesson that would resonate far beyond the walls of the prison yard. The prison yard was quiet now, but the silence was heavy with realization. The bullies who had tried to humiliate Steven Seagal had been completely humbled not by brute force, but by calm authority, precision, and unwavering mental control. Their earlier arrogance had crumbled under the weight of his presence, and every inmate who had watched was left in awe. Steven didn't celebrate. He didn't mock. He simply stood tall, letting the lesson sink in. The bullies slumped back, unable to meet his gaze, their pride shattered. Even the most defiant among them had learned something profound. Respect cannot be demanded. It is earned through strength, discipline, and integrity. Phones still recorded the scene. In a matter of minutes, whispers turned into conversations, and conversations into excitement. "Did you see that?" murmured one inmate. "He didn't even hit them, and they're completely done." Another added, "That's Steven Seagal, the calmest, most dangerous guy I've ever seen." The mental impact on the bullies was immediate. Every attempt to intimidate, every step they had taken to assert dominance, had backfired. The recognition of Steven's mastery had flipped the yard's power dynamics. For the spectators, the lesson was clear. Aggression, without understanding, leads to humiliation. But calm, focused authority commands respect effortlessly. Even the prison guards, who had been watching cautiously from a distance, couldn't help but be impressed. They had expected a confrontation, maybe even a fight, but what they witnessed was far more powerful. A master demonstrating control, composure, and subtle dominance. The bully's defeat was complete, yet Steven didn't revel in it. His restraint amplified the lesson. As the day went on, the story spread quickly among the inmates. People recounted it to one another, describing the calm precision, the piercing gaze, and the silent authority that had reduced seasoned bullies to trembling hesitation. It wasn't just a tale of strength, it was a demonstration of wisdom, discipline, and mental mastery. Outside the prison, the video captured on phones began to circulate. Viewers around the world were drawn in by the suspense, the tension, and the ultimate humbling of those who had underestimated him. Comments poured in, with people expressing awe at Steven's calmness and praising the lesson in restraint and mental control. For the audience, the takeaway was universal. Strength isn't about rage or aggression. It's about presence, composure, and understanding one's own power. The bully's arrogance had been dismantled without a single reckless move, and that contrast made the story unforgettable. Steven Seagal walked away from the scene, calm as ever, leaving behind not chaos, but clarity. The bullies had been humbled. The crowd had witnessed a lesson in respect, and the story, now immortalized through recordings, became an example of how courage, intelligence, and calm authority can transform a moment of potential conflict into a powerful moral statement. The bullies thought they were in control. They thought they could humiliate him. But in the end, it was Steven's calm, his mastery, and his quiet authority that commanded respect. And that lesson is one that resonates far beyond these prison walls. If you believe true strength comes from calm, control, and respect, type respect in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs to see how mental mastery beats aggression every time, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping, inspiring stories like this one.